Welcome back, fellow historians, to our study of the history of colonial and revolutionary New York. In our previous lessons, we learned about the Native Americans who lived in New York, such as the Iroquois and the Algonquin tribes. In our lesson today, we're going to fast forward in history and talk about something called the Age of Exploration. Our teaching point for today is historians will analyze the reason why the Europeans wanted to explore. For our lesson, you're going to need a notebook, a pencil, and your investigating hat. Please pause the video now to gather your materials and to copy down your teaching point. I also want to remind you, you should be pausing the video to take notes as we go along. Here are some words that I want you to keep in mind. Motivation, which means something someone wants. Monarchy, which is a form of government ruled by a king or queen. And the Age of Exploration, which refers to a time when explorers discovered the Americas. Okay, I also want you to keep in mind these countries. These European countries are important. England, France, Spain, and Portugal. These four countries were basically very important to the Age of Exploration. Of course, there were other European countries, such as the Netherlands, who took part in the Age of Exploration, but they weren't as successful as these other four countries. But I do want you to make special note of the Netherlands because I'm going to refer to them in our future videos. In Asia, we have countries such as India, Persia, China, and Indonesia. So what is the connection between the European countries and the Asian countries? And how did this begin the Age of Exploration? Well, it all actually started with the Silk Road. So this is the Silk Road. It is a trading route from Asia to Europe. And it started in 2nd century BCE and it lasted until the 18th century CE. Now the Silk Road was the way in which the countries traded with one another. So what was so important? What did Asia have that the European countries really wanted? Well, it was two things, spices and silk. So at that time, the European countries were willing to pay high prices for the spices that were grown in Asia and for silk that was made in China. For hundreds of years, the Chinese actually kept the process of making silk a secret. And the reason they did this was because they understood and they knew how valuable silk was. Countries from all over the world were willing to pay a lot of gold, silver, and precious stones just for silk. And so the Chinese really wanted to keep the secret to themselves so that they can bargain and they can ask for the highest price. When we take a look at this map, it shows us the ports or the cities that were open to trading. It all started in this city, Xi'an, China, and this was the main port for trading with China. Now, if we go all the way here, you're going to notice that this port, Rome, is in Italy. And this was the main port for all the European countries. You can't see it in this map, but Europe is actually above Rome. And so what that meant was that the Italian merchants and the Mediterranean merchants were the ones who were in control of the trading with Europe and China. And so the rest of Europe actually did not like that they were not in control of the trade. And so what does that mean? Well, they eventually decided in the 1400s to find a different way to Asia. Now, at that time, in the 1400s, no one had actually sailed the ocean, but that was the only way to find a new route to Asia. was going westward. And so they believed, the Europeans, which is right here, here are the Europeans, they believed that if they were to travel westward, they would eventually find a route all the way to Asia. But of course they had two problems. First, no one had ever sailed the ocean, so they had to find someone who was willing to do that. And the second problem was there were other continents in between Europe and Asia, specifically North America and South America. So if you take a look at this map, it's a map of early voyages of discovery and exploration. So here's Europe, and they wanted to find a new route, so they were going westward. They thought that if they went westward and sailed the seas, they would eventually reach Asia. But of course, as we see in this map, they did not find Asia. They found North America and South America. And so that gave birth to something called the Age of Exploration. This started in the 1400s and lasted until the 1700s. And to recap, the reason was because the Europeans wanted to find a different way or route to Asia. And it began with Christopher Columbus when he sailed and found the Caribbean islands and South America. Alright guys, it's now your turn. You're going to watch the video entitled Age of Exploration, and I want you to keep this question in mind. Would you say that the explorations were successful? And I want you to make a connection. So I want you also to remember these three things. The motivation behind the Age of Exploration. It was to find a route to Asia. So were they successful in finding a new route? Second, how did the discovery or explorations of the Americas, how did that affect Europe? And finally, how did the explorations affect the Native Americans? Then when you think about those three things, I want you to consider, would you say the explorations were successful and why? Alright guys, I'm going to see you next time, and I hope you enjoy the video.